Amid rising homelessness and growing encampments in the city, St. Mary's Church in Barrie hosted the second Symposium on Homelessness, responding to our community with compassion and hope. Reverend Laurence Leger, popularly known as Father Larry, pastor of the St. Mary's Parish, set the tone for the evening by calling on the community to shift its mindset from judgment to compassion when confronting homelessness.
But the idea of compassion is one that I want to invite us to turn the dial, as it were, from thinking about when seeing tents or homeless, instead of condemnation, to change the dial to compassion. And when we look at what is compassion, you can't just throw it in and say, okay, we already wanted to do this, this, and this, so we're going to call that a compassionate, caring response. No.
Barrie Police Chief Rick Johnston spoke about the evolving role of police in addressing social issues. He urged the audience to distinguish between crime and discomfort and to respond with both compassion and critical thinking.
Anywhere from 75 to 80% of what we do on a yearly basis is social disorder. There's not as much crime as you would think. Now, I'm going to suggest that we are inundated with social media and other aspects like that that would convince you otherwise. I guess I'm challenged with, I hear quite often that Barrie is unsafe. I feel unsafe. I won't go out at night. My children won't go out at night, my parents won't go out at night. I won't go out at night because I'm afraid. I feel unsafe. And then I ask. And there are, please understand, we have crime in this city. Like any other city, like any other given population of humanity. Crime occurs. But we actually live in a very safe city relative to the province, relative to the country, and quite honestly, on a global scale, it is a very, very, very safe city, province, and country. And that just may not align with how we feel. And I acknowledge that. I'm not going to argue with your lived experience, because those are yours. But I'm just going to challenge that concept of fear of crime and fear of being unsafe. Is it actually a fear of being unsafe, or is it a fear of discomfort? And I don't feel comfortable, because that's okay too. We work with a number of community groups, and we have good days and bad days. But we try, because community groups, municipal government, however you feel, provincial government, federal government, law enforcement, or public safety, no one's doing it because they're evil masterminds, because they want to make a difference and they want to have a positive impact on their community. You may not agree with that, but they're trying.
Keenan Aylwin, former Barrie City Councillor and housing advocate, addressed the structural causes of homelessness, emphasizing the impact of colonialism, poverty, and housing policy. He called for recognizing housing as a human right and building solidarity with unhoused people.
And I want all of us to take a moment to imagine what it's actually like to be unhoused. Imagine you're evicted from your home, or you lose your job, and you don't have family to fall back on. So you end up on the street. You then end up in an encampment. There, you find a relatively safe, warm, dry place to call home, in a tent, yeah? But you're surrounded by people who are going through similar things that you're going through. So you find a little bit of community there. Now imagine that two of the people living in that same encampment as you are murdered, and you're displaced from that encampment for the police investigation. And instead of being offered housing, instead of being offered trauma counseling for what you've been through, you're offered a plastic chair to sit on overnight in the former police station. So now imagine that you move your tent to Mulcaster Street, near the Busby Centre. There, you're close to services. You feel a bit more safe because there's other people around. And then a few days later, you notice a group of local politicians holding a press conference, using your tent as a backdrop to talk about homelessness. But you hear words like lawlessness, crime, criminal. You almost feel like you're being blamed for the situation you find yourself in.
Andrew Scarringvelli, Director of Housing and Homelessness Services for the County of Simcoe, provided insights into the county's housing strategy. He outlined key programs and services while stressing the urgent need for long-term investment in deeply affordable and supportive housing.
Affordable housing. We hear that all the time. What's affordable? In the traditional sense, affordable housing is 30%, no more than 30% of someone or a household's gross income. 30%. As Keenan mentioned earlier, what are social assistance rates? I'm going to put OW on the spot here. Monthly total, what is it? $733. $733 a month is what an individual on Ontario Works receives. So the shelter component would be what? Shelter component? $390. So Ontario Works is broken down by your basic needs and your shelter. $390. Someone in receipt of Ontario Works gets every month for shelter. You show me where you're going to find anything for $390. You can't. And so that's the same rate on Ontario Works since 2018. Now, length on the wait list, if you are in a priority, on average, you're probably looking at about a year in Simcoe County. So an average person who has a pretty good selection on their housing application, how long do you, it varies, it gets a little tricky, and it's a little dangerous for me to say this, but how long do you think it would take an average household to be housed? 2, 10? Close, you've been waiting since. You're going to find me after, yeah. 8 years right now. City of Toronto, 35 years. A couple of the programs that have been created so far using these modular facilities, one was targeted towards, or is targeted towards seniors 55 plus, another is for youth. We also have 2 more modulars, another one on the way for the city of Barrie, should be arriving next week. That will support 40 more individuals.
Liz Grummett, a representative of the Canadian Mental Health Association with over 2 decades of experience, highlighted the connection between mental health and homelessness. She challenged stigma and emphasized the power of listening as an act of compassion.
Some of the language we use, and I've heard great language tonight, when we think about someone who is struggling, they're a person first. So whether they're unhoused or they're struggling with mental illness or addiction, we're always a person first. So we often say a person is struggling or a person needs support. So that's something else to think about. What kind of language do we use? We know there's a shift. Again, when I go into high schools and I ask the question, when you think about mental illness, what comes to your mind? I always suspect you're going to hear crazy, you're going to hear psycho, but it's not there. Again, the language has changed. So as we look at different generations, we know languages have changed throughout the time. But again, reflect on what kind of language are you using? When you talk about someone who is struggling, maybe it's someone you care about, think about that language, because it really impacts that stigma. And of course, we have a crisis line and crisis beds. So perhaps you don't need the hospital, perhaps you need some support. We have a program for that too. That's 24 hours, 7 days a week. We certainly have specialized programs. Maybe folks that are struggling with a serious mental illness that need a psychiatrist, medication support, a social worker. We have those programs as well. We have justice programs, and of course our crisis programs.
Russell, a community member with lived experience, shared a moving personal story and the words of a peer. He urged the audience to meet people with understanding, not fear, and to stand with those experiencing mental illness, addiction, and homelessness.
You see, I'm trying to represent my community from all sides and perspectives. Like it or not, we're all fighting in this fight together. And today feels like another mountaintop moment for me. A chance to shout out how valuable, precious life is. And to be mentally strong first. I've always advocated for mentally strong first. We would never leave a heart attack victim alone, and we'd never leave a child gasping for air alone. So why are we leaving people with mentally unstable conditions alone? The answer is most often fear. Fear of what we don't understand, fear of what we don't control, what we can't control, fear that makes us step back when we should step forward. When I hit my lowest point, I remember thinking, where do I start? And the answer was simple. You start anywhere, but you start. Because the only thing that kept me alive at that point was a small thread of love. That thread, this connection, is what saves people. So today my message is simple. Stop leaving people alone in their pain. Let's guide instead of shackle, heal instead of shame, and lift instead of judge. Hope isn't a passing thought. It's what gets us up in the morning. Faith steadies us when we're shaken, and compassion reminds us that every one of us has struggled too. Because when we see someone homeless, addicted, or high, we often see only chaos, the tense, the litter, the brokenness. But what we fail to see is that their conscious self is asleep.
Representatives from Barrie Cares presented a practical community response to homelessness. They outlined plans for a campus of care model that brings services and shelter together in one coordinated space. Robert Sikoja, CEO of Habitat for Humanity Huronia, explained how the organization is helping low-income families transition into affordable home ownership, thereby reducing pressure on rental and shelter systems and supporting long-term housing stability. At the end, speakers answered questions from the audience, including from Simcoe Community Media. Following is the coverage of the event.
My name is Father Laurence Leger. I'm the pastor here at St. Mary's, and it's our honor to be able to host the second symposium. I want to put the word annual, but my staff don't want me to put that there yet. But and maybe one of these days we won't have a need for a symposium. That's our hope. So. We have a large number of speakers who are here. Since May of 2023, St. Mary's Parish has been at work on 2 feet, if you will, on the social justice platform, working with 2 feet. 1 foot is providing 100 meals every Saturday evening to Busby to help feed homeless, those who are unhoused. But we've also seen the need to advocate for change in social justice, to work for advocacy against structures and systems that continue to put people down. And so that is where these symposiums were born from, that desire to work with that other feet. So we don't just hop around with 1 foot, but that we go with both feet, working for justice and advocating for change, but also meeting the immediate needs of those who are unhoused. We've also been involved since 2021 with the Breakfast to Go. Recently, it's been funded through the County of Simcoe, and so we're grateful for that, but we still staff that with our volunteers on Thursday mornings and contribute to a group of volunteers on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday mornings. But what I want us to do, part of our title for tonight, is responding with compassion and hope. And the hope part comes from this Jubilee year, 2025, a Jubilee year for us as Christians, and we are pilgrims of hope. But the idea of compassion is one that I want to invite us to turn the dial, as it were, from thinking about when seeing tents or homeless, instead of condemnation, to change the dial to compassion. And when we look at what is compassion, you can't just throw it in and say, okay, we already wanted to do this, this, and this, so we're going to call that a compassionate, caring response. No. Compassion means, it comes from the Latin word, compassion. 2 words. Cum, meaning with, and passion, meaning suffering. Compassion. To be with someone in their suffering. That's our call if we're going to be compassionate. And that's what I want to challenge us to do, to respond with compassion and hope, to be people who are engaged and accompany, as Pope Francis often said, accompanying those who are unhoused so that we can be with them in their suffering, understand and know, and therefore respond with compassion. So that just sets the table, as it were. I'm going to invite our Chief of Police, Rich Johnston, to come up and to speak.
So thank you for the invitation to come and speak. I suppose my presence here might be a little surprising to some, and if it's not, it should be. I am the Chief of Police, civil authority, perhaps part of the system that may be a challenge in terms of how we change, how we address with some of the more challenging, complex social issues we face. My role historically has been one to directly focus on law and order and crime. And I would argue that's a historic model for policing. I think we've seen it change drastically. I think policing has become far more complex and the expectations of your police service have changed. And so when you look at the police, yes, we will always be present to enforce the law as they are written. But in addition, truth be told, so much more of what we do on a daily basis is around social disorder. And those are two very, very different things. And I do want to clarify that for everyone here tonight because we will enter into discussion. And I think it may provide a little insight into what the police can and in most cases cannot do in our society today. So the law is the simple part. You folks elect individuals, be it at the municipal, provincial, or federal level. They pass laws. Those laws are tested in a court of law through a justice system, and there's case law produced. And so our actions are not to exceed those. What's written and the case law, the tested law. And so we do our best to stay within those limits. We are not the law. We represent all of you in carrying out the law and the enforcement of it. That's a small part of what we do. Truth be told, and my deputy's here and he knows I'm going to speak. We're going to have to dive into the data a little bit here because the reality is anywhere from 75 to 80% of what we do on a yearly basis is social disorder. There's not as much crime as you would think. Now, I'm going to suggest that we are inundated with social media and other aspects like that would convince you otherwise. But the dial turning toward compassion, I'm going to suggest to you that we look at it through a different lens. Because we speak in front of City Council and we speak with citizens on a regular basis. And I ask you all here tonight to do the same thing that I ask of our citizens when I meet them one-on-one. And I just, let us assume good intent, but let us be critical in our thinking. Constructive, but critical. I guess I'm challenged with, I hear quite often that Barrie is unsafe. I feel unsafe. I won't go out at night. My children won't go out at night. My parents won't go out at night. I won't go out at night because I'm afraid. I feel unsafe. And then I ask. And there are, please understand, we have crime in this city. Like any other city, like any other given population of humanity. Crime occurs. But we actually live in a very safe city relative to the province, relative to the country, and quite honestly, on a global scale, it is a very, very, very safe city, province, and country. And that just may not align with how we feel. And I acknowledge that. I'm not going to argue with your lived experience, because those are yours. But I'm just going to challenge that concept of fear of crime and fear of being unsafe. Is it actually a fear of being unsafe, or is it a fear of discomfort and I don't feel comfortable? Because that's okay too. We work with a number of community groups, and we have good days and bad days. But we try, because community groups, municipal government, however you feel, provincial government, federal government, law enforcement, or public safety, no one's doing it because they're evil masterminds, because they want to make a difference and they want to have a positive impact on their community. You may not agree with that, but they're trying. And it's a hard go, but the reality is, we're never going to get this right, folks. But as a public safety official, what I'm going to tell you is our experience with, I'll speak directly to the challenges we face in our community today, and that intersectionality between the unhoused, and some suffering addiction issues, and some suffering mental health issues, and some suffering all three or two, and it is as complex as each one of you, and perhaps someone in your family or friend. The challenge we face is that our experience of seeing someone who sort of may look like us, but is acting in a manner that we don't think we'd ever act in that way, and how uncomfortable that makes us feel. And that's okay. Because I think there's a part of us that's like, I shouldn't feel this way. But it's the reality, and we live it every day. So, you have the police here, and I can tell you when a law is broken, but someone who may look disheveled, who may not have had the opportunity to shower, who may not have had the opportunity to eat, or do a number of things and looks completely unkept, makes you feel unsafe. Or does it make you feel uncomfortable? Because those are different. Because I can tell you from our data, in terms of crime, there is a select population within our community, within any community, very, very small. In fact, if I was to come up with a figure, it would be 29 people in 2024 that committed 20% of the crime harm. Not the number of crimes, but the most serious crimes. That is a disproportionality. 29 people. There's 160,000 people in Barrie, and that's if our population is stable, and if it's not, we have influx and egress every single day. And this is it's a tourist-heavy city in the summer, so we have an influx of a lot of people. 29 people, folks, that commit 20% of the harm in the city. Now, we do have recent events. I won't speak to those specifically, but I understand that can challenge our concept. And that's okay. When we talk today, we're going to hear from different perspectives, and that's incredibly important. I think if we assume that good intent, the police presence here is, we can tell you what we know, we can tell you what we can do, we can tell you what we can't do. But make no mistake, we're also here to learn. We're not getting this right. In case anyone thought we were, we're not. None of us are. I know Barrie's the only place in Ontario and Canada that is suffering these challenges. Or wait, no, we're not. I know. And appreciating it. It's just that we're living it every day. They could be our family, they could be our friends. The challenge here is, how do we do it differently? And I think this may be happening across cities and towns across this country. I don't know. But for our role, what role do we play? And what do each one of us do? Look, we can do things, but they're incredibly finite and limited in their role and their ability to address a challenging situation. I'm not here to tell you if someone steals something from you, that is acceptable. I am a compassionate person. But compassion goes 360. Compassion for the individual in suffering that may be unhoused, that may be having mental health challenges, and maybe having addiction issues that are, and folks, if you haven't suffered those, and I wouldn't suggest that anyone wants to step into those shoes, be cautious if we're going to put on the old judgment pants. Now, if you're the victim, though, of a loss of property, it doesn't negate that experience for you, and it doesn't make it right. And I'll be the first one to say, I am a compassionate person, but no one's entitled to take your property and to make you feel uncomfortable. And safe is different, and that's when we play a greater role, but the reality is, more often than not, it's a discomfort. And that says more about us than them. I mean, if they weren't faced with those challenges, you think you'd want to switch places with them? I mean, I think everyone recognizes that when you go from condemnation and appreciating, that's the easy way out. I've heard the terms, get a job, too lazy to work. Everyone pays taxes. And I know they're high, and I have no doubt that we're going to hear one of the sources of those taxes pay for this person up here to do their job. And I accept that. I just challenge everyone here when we talk further and question and answers, I beg you, if you think there's a simple solution to this complex problem, you're right. I guarantee you it's wrong. It's a complex problem for a reason. It's existed, we just haven't seen it. And yes, it has grown exponentially. And yes, we are faced with a population that is, in particular with some current substances, that it would just shock you, the level of addiction. This feels wrong to say in the house of worship, but I mean, and I wasn't policing in the 80s, but it seems to me like, and we talk about the concept, if you're familiar with the term crack cocaine, and I mean, you look at that in comparison to fentanyl, shocking. We thought crack was bad, it's not compared to this stuff. So, I will say this, as we engage on this little journey, I invite some critical thinking. I will assume a good intent from all of our speakers, and I'm sure you will as well. We exist to make our city safer. That's why I signed up, that's why the deputy signed up. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do, is be there when someone needed help.
And I'm going to invite Keenan Aylwin to come forward. Keenan is a member of the Barrie Housing and Homelessness Justice Network. He's on staff at the Gilbert Centre, and we're very pleased to invite him here. He was a former city councillor. He's going to talk about the contributing factors.
Thank you, Father Larry. Thank you, Chief Johnston. And thank you to everyone for being here tonight. I want to start off, a week ago was the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And so I want to start off by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. And the Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, who are collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. And as we're here tonight talking about homelessness, I think it's particularly important that we recognize that Indigenous people are disproportionately experiencing homelessness in our community and across this country. We know that 21% of people experiencing homelessness in Simcoe County identify as Indigenous, compared to only 5% of the overall population. That doesn't happen by chance. That's a result of colonization, of broken treaties, of intergenerational trauma caused by residential schools, and ongoing systemic racism. And so when we have conversations about housing and homelessness, we also need to talk about colonialism, about the land that we're on, about the rights of Indigenous people to live in safety and dignity and with self-determination on this land. When we displace Indigenous people from encampments that they're living in, that's a continuation of that process of colonization. And I think as people living on this land, we need to acknowledge that truth and work towards reconciliation and justice in our communities. But when it comes to homelessness more broadly, homelessness is and has been an emergency in Barrie for quite a while. And I want all of us to take a moment to imagine what it's actually like to be unhoused. Imagine you're evicted from your home, or you lose your job, and you don't have family to fall back on. So you end up on the street. You take as many belongings as you can fit in a backpack or shopping cart. You go to the local emergency shelter, but they're full. Or you have a dog and they don't allow pets. Or you're a couple and you don't want to be separated from your partner, so they turn you away. You then end up in an encampment. There you find a relatively safe, warm, dry place to call home, in a tent, yeah? But you're surrounded by people who are going through similar things that you're going through. So you find a little bit of community there. Now imagine that two of the people living in that same encampment as you are murdered, and you're displaced from that encampment for the police investigation. And instead of being offered housing, instead of being offered trauma counseling for what you've been through, you're offered a plastic chair to sit on overnight in the former police station. That happened in Barrie not too long ago. So now imagine that you move your tent to Mulcaster Street, near the Busby Centre. There you're close to services, you feel a bit more safe because there's other people around. And then a few days later, you notice a group of local politicians holding a press conference, using your tent as a backdrop to talk about homelessness. But you hear words like lawlessness, crime, criminal. You almost feel like you're being blamed for the situation you find yourself in. And then a day later, you're issued an eviction notice, and then the day after that, you're given 1 hour to decide if you want to pick up all of your belongings and move to a temporary shelter space in Collingwood, more than an hour away from the community that you know, from the community where your support system is, to a town where you have no knowledge of the services available to you. You don't feel prepared to make that decision on such short notice, so you stay. And then you hear local politicians say that people like you are refusing support, or refusing housing, that you're not welcome in this city, that you don't belong here. I want us all to imagine what that feels like. The isolation, the hopelessness, the shame, the trauma of all of that. That's the reality facing unhoused people in our community. And I want us to take some time to think about why people in positions of power are so quick to point the finger of blame at some of the most vulnerable people in our community, some of the people with the least amount of power. That's not a policy solution, that's a political strategy to pit people against each other, to deflect blame from themselves as policymakers, to scapegoat marginalized people for what are societal issues. And it reminds me of rhetoric we're seeing from a certain politician to our south, who demonizes migrants, who pits people against each other, neighbor against neighbor. Those types of politicians want us to keep punching down so that we never look up. Because if we looked up, we would see that this crisis wasn't caused by our unhoused neighbors. It was caused by decades of government policy decisions to abandon housing as a public good, housing as a human right. But what does that mean to treat housing But what does that actually mean to treat housing as a human right? We hear that, but what does that actually mean? If we take a step back and look at how we treat primary care and health care in this country, we all recognize that health care is a basic human need. So we have a universal health care system that, while far from perfect, provides primary care to all Canadian citizens and permanent residents as a right, without a direct cost. Housing, arguably, is just as important if not more important than primary care for our general health, our well-being, and our dignity as human beings. But instead of treating housing as a human right, we treat it as a commodity, a product to be bought and sold, a way to make a profit. And we're seeing the disastrous results of that with the housing crisis across this country. Large corporations and investors are buying up housing stock in Canada at an alarming rate. Rents go up and up and up year after year. Housing becomes less attainable. But there are solutions. One of those solutions is treating housing as a public good, or social housing. And we used to build social housing in this country. In Ontario alone, between 1986 and 1994, we built more than 72,000 units of social housing. But then in the mid-90s, the federal government slashed funding for housing, and social housing construction fell to near zero levels. Then in the year 2000, the province of Ontario downloaded responsibility for social housing to municipalities like the County of Simcoe, and since then, social housing construction has remained extremely low. So that's how we got to where we are today. A crisis, a housing crisis, decades in the making. But the good news is that if policy decisions got us here, policy decisions can get us out. We need all levels of government to reinvest in non-market housing, social housing, supportive housing, co-op housing, the types of homes that put people before profit. We need real income supports. We need real income supports that actually lift people out of poverty instead of trapping them there, so that no one has to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. We need to stop spending valuable public dollars on evicting unhoused people, policing unhoused people who have nowhere else to go, and instead invest that money in building homes, building a community that cares. But here's the thing, government will only act if people do. And that's where all of us come in. Every faith community like this, every neighborhood, every person in this city has a role to play. We can go and talk to our friends, our families, our neighbors about the true causes of this crisis. We can push back when we hear scapegoating and blame and misinformation. We can show up at city council meetings, at rallies, at the ballot box, and demand better from our leaders. When we refuse to be divided, when we reject the narrative that blames people who are poor or unhoused for the situation they're in, we create the space for real solutions. This isn't about us and them. This is about all of us. This is about the kind of community we want to be. And so I want to leave you with this. Instead of imagining what it's like to live without a home, can we actually imagine a community where everyone has one? Where everybody can live a life of dignity? Where housing is treated as a human right, not a privilege, not an investment strategy? That's not a fantasy. That's a choice. That's a choice we can all make together, right here in Barrie, right across the country. But we need to stop punching down. We need to start looking up. We need to stand together with our unhoused neighbors, and we can make that vision a reality. Thank you.
So thank you, Keenan, for your passion. There's going to be something at the end that's going to match what you just said, and we didn't figure that out ahead of time, so I'm making a declaration about that. We want to provide information, right? That's part of our goal, is with the Advocacy and Justice Committee here at St. Mary's, we want to provide information. And so we've invited Simcoe County and the Canadian Mental Health Association to speak. So I'm going to invite Andrew Scrivelli to come forward to speak about what are the resources available in our community that would be helping this kind of community.
Good evening. Sorry, I'm looking out into the hallway and I feel like I'm not looking at anyone when I'm looking at the prompt. I do have a couple slides and did pull together some notes. I do have some team here because if you let me go off script, we'll probably be ready for breakfast by the time I'm done. So Chief Johnston, Keenan, fantastic. And Keenan especially, thank you very much for the comments. You've basically are enabling me to skip over my first couple slides with the history lesson on how we got here. My name is Andrew Scavrell. I'm the Director of Housing and Homelessness with the County of Simcoe. And I think to echo what's already been said without going too far into details, if this wasn't such a complex issue and there was a simple solution or one that is a single solution that we can implement right away, we wouldn't be here right now. And don't take this the wrong way, I would have loved to not been here tonight. But the reality is that's not the case. And but the reality also is that the fact that there's so many people in this room, many faces I've never seen before. Some of you, I know we've emailed, we've exchanged conversations, and just the passion and the thought that you're here tonight means that you want to make a difference. And I can tell you, in my role and on behalf of the county, we want to see nothing more than change ourselves. And we know the previous days of working and the way things have gone are not the path forward. And I look forward to engaging in continuous conversation, but also some action. So I thought just for the purpose of the next couple of minutes, just to provide a bit more of an educational perspective as opposed to knowing that we'll have an opportunity for conversations after. But before I get too far down the road, I know that, in public settings, everyone might not be comfortable engaging in conversations or sharing their thoughts or even some suggestions around how we could best support those that are experiencing homelessness here in Simcoe County, in the city of Barrie as well. So I will leave my information. I have an open door. Give me a call. Always happy to meet one-on-one, but I know that public settings aren't always the most comfortable. So with that said, just going to provide a quick overview. As I say, quick overview education. You get this slide you might not even be able to see. Yeah, bad choice of colors. All right, 0 for 1. Okay. This is part of a 10, it's actually just going to council for endorsement, but this is the county's 10-year housing and homelessness strategy. If you can't tell, which I'm sorry you probably can't, the level of complexity, housing on a continuum is very broad, and also the scope around what levels of government assistance, financial assistance, aligns with each of these housing outcomes is very complex in itself. For the purpose, actually, we are missing a couple. Okay. Oh, they put in some fancy stuff here. Okay. So for the purpose of tonight, the piece we'll really speak around is housing is not just simply what we see or what we feel, our neighbors are residing in, and it's not just a simply affordable housing. And so I think it's important just to break down some of the language. Affordable housing, we hear that all the time. What's affordable? So the traditional, in the traditional sense, affordable housing is 30%, no more than 30% of someone or a household's gross income. 30%. As Keenan mentioned earlier, what are social assistance rates? I'm going to put OW on the spot here. Monthly total, what is it? $733. $733 a month is what an individual on Ontario Works receives. So the shelter component would be what? Shelter component? $390. So Ontario Works is broken down by your basic needs and your shelter. $390. Someone in receipt of Ontario Works gets every month for shelter. You show me where you're going to find anything for $390. You can't. And so that's the same rate on Ontario Works since 2018. When Keenan mentioned that, the writing was on the wall, I challenge each of you, I encourage you to review AMO's report on homelessness. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario released a very, I won't say scathing, a very stark report that paints a pretty clear image around how we got to where we are, but also without critical investments, immediate critical investments, at both the provincial and federal levels, it's only going to get worse. And to think about what we're here for tonight, if that gets worse, if the people that are entering homelessness continue to increase, it far outweighs anything you could build faster. You can't build homes fast enough than the number of people we are seeing entering homelessness. Many of it's out of our control. You think about the factors that are creating homelessness. We are seeing more seniors than ever before entering homelessness. Marital breakdowns, the inability of a single income or a single fixed source of income to maintain a household. Survivors of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, human trafficking. All of those numbers are increasing drastically. There's people that are experiencing homelessness that are 65, 70, 75 years old, have never experienced homelessness in their life. That is scary. And now to think that social assistance rates are inadequate, cost of living is astronomical. But with that said, the number of, I'm just going to skip through this here, the number of dedicated individuals and organizations and agencies throughout Simcoe County that, despite sometimes feeling like they're taking one step forward and 4 steps backwards, they show up day in and day out. Many of them are in the room right now. I see quite a few down this back row here. So whether we are in agreement with approaches that are taken at provincial or federal levels, these are individuals, your outreach teams, your emergency shelter providers, your social assistance staff. They show up day in and day out, despite them knowing that their efforts could very well not mean meaningful permanent housing solutions, but they keep showing up. And so it makes my job easy to show up every day because of the dedicated staff, dedicated community members, and the fact that each of you here tonight brings hope for us as the service manager, hope for us as emergency shelter providers, as outreach providers, as social assistance staff. So thank you for being here. And I think I think I'll just touch on a couple more terms just before we go to the question period, because we do use language loosely sometimes in terms of homelessness. You hear a lot of mixed statistics. You hear terms of housing, and so we hear community housing quite a bit. And community housing really includes all social and affordable housing that's provided by Simcoe County Housing Corporation, nonprofits, and other community agencies, co-ops, organizations. Supportive housing really combines housing assistance with those wraparound supports. So often, that's mental health supports, addiction supports, assistance with daily living activities. Housing assistance is tools that bridge the gap. So the gap between what someone could afford and market rent. So affordable housing, we have what's called rent geared to income, which is our largest form of affordable housing. So in Simcoe County, between Simcoe County Housing Corporation, didn't have that high enough. Between Simcoe County Housing Corporation and our nonprofits, there's about 4,000 rent geared to income. So that is rent that is set at 30% of someone's household income. So it varies. It's dependent on the individual. The challenge is that rent geared to income is tied to specific units. There's a wait list. So we refer to that as a centralized wait list. So individuals, although we have priorities for individuals that might be, like I said, survivor of intimate partner violence, human trafficking, for the most part, an individual goes on a standard centralized wait list. Now, length on the wait list, if you are in a priority, on average, you're probably looking at about a year in Simcoe County. It all depends, obviously, on the number of selections you make on your housing application. There are a broad number of properties, housing unit selections, so you have a choice. When you apply for RGI, you can select every single RGI unit across Simcoe County. You probably have a pretty good likelihood of being housed quicker than, well, actually, very good likelihood compared to you might just want that one specific building in a specific municipality. So an average person who has a pretty good selection on their housing application, how long do you, it varies, it gets a little tricky, and it's a little dangerous for me to say this, but how long do you think it would take an average household to be housed? 2, 10? Close, you've been waiting since. You're going to find me after, yeah. 8 years right now. City of Toronto, 35 years. There is a stronger likelihood that individuals experiencing homelessness apply for RGI in large urban areas that will pass away before they will be offered a housing unit. That's the reality that we're in right now. To what Keenan said earlier, there's not a single person in this room that's to blame for the position we're in today. This was years in the making of underfunding, underdevelopment, lack of housing development, but not just housing development, affordable housing development, deeply affordable housing development. So, on that, that's where the importance of rent supplements come in. These are supplements that we put in the hands of individuals that allow them to obtain affordable housing, or to bridge the gap between what they can afford and what market rents are. So it could be the Canadian Ontario Housing Benefit. We have in-house rent supplements. This is just another tool that we utilize, knowing that we can build our way out of this problem. We need to look at getting creative, getting innovative, finding quicker access to housing solutions, and that might not be brand new housing stock, it might be retrofits, it's strategic acquisitions in terms of previous buildings. We need to get more creative to bring people the types of housing that makes sense for them. And a lot of that is supports, and I do say the need for supportive housing is because we've kept people outside for so long. People have lived outside so long that their need to have additional supports when they finally come inside is that much more magnified. So, outside of the housing continuum, the important piece that we see right now, and I know I have some service providers in the room, and I will say, I know I've mentioned this already, it's an absolute privilege to see the level of dedication and compassion that people in a sector where they feel that it's often a losing battle. People aren't lining up for this work. It's hard. They don't do it because they're looking for a pat on the back. They do it because there's a human being at the end that needs them. And they see that. And we at the county do not provide a lot of direct services. We partner, we rely heavily on our community partners, our agencies, our stakeholders. They're the ones that are doing all the heavy lifting out there. And so, on that note, just a couple really quick pieces. Said I wouldn't go off track, I'm starting to, so I'm going to bring it back in quickly. Supportive rapid rehousing programs. Some people refer to a form of bridge housing, but you will see these shiny buildings perhaps rolling through Simcoe County every now and then. The county did procure as a means to increase access to affordable or housing outcomes, but also to increase shelter options. So what I mean by that is a couple of the programs that have been created so far using these modular facilities. One was targeted towards, or is targeted towards seniors 55 plus, another is for youth. We also have 2 more modulars, another one on the way for the city of Barrie, should be arriving next week. That will support 40 more individuals. The purpose is to bring people low barrier, multiple different reasons, but it's to get people out of shelter into rapid rehousing. So support of 24/7 programs within has a strong likelihood of providing a rent subsidy that then gets the person housed permanently. What that does is that opens up shelter space, and the individuals that are unsheltered and living in encampments can come inside. And while there is no perfect solution, and reasons why people may or may not come inside vary immensely, again, we can't wait for these big critical investments in affordable housing. Instead, we need to get creative, and this is one of those ways that we're trying right now. So, 2 minutes. Okay, I'll do it in one. The one final piece I could just speak to is the Heart Hub. Probably not the best person who's speaking to us, because I do see the Heart Hub manager and director to my left here. So I will keep it high level, but they are around if anyone has questions. But many of you will probably recognize or remember last fall, the province put a hold on all safe consumption sites and replaced it with what they termed as the Heart Hub. Regardless of whether you agree with the approach or disagree with the approach, it is something, and I know there is a strong consortium of individuals and agencies working very closely to provide supports for individuals experiencing homelessness who might have mental health or addictions challenges, and they are connecting them with wraparound supports, access to primary care, mental health and addiction counseling, detox, etc. So I will, again, not to put the ladies over there on the spot, but they'll be around after for any questions. Thanks.
I'm going to invite Liz Grummet to come forward. She's with the Canadian Mental Health Association.
All right, thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful to be here tonight. I look around the room and I'm a little nervous. There's a lot of people here, and that's incredible. We know events like this is what can make change in our community. So I thank all of you for taking some time tonight and joining us. So I work at the Canadian Mental Health Association. I've been there for 25 years. Yes, you might go, wow, you must have been a baby. So I've worked in a variety of programs. I started off as a student and I never left. I now work in our communications, our fundraising, and community engagement. We started off very small, and we were formed by a group of people in Barrie who wanted to make change in their community. We now have 275 staff. We're throughout Barrie, Orillia, Collingwood, Midland, so really serving Simcoe County. So I like to always begin with a little bit of information about some terms that get used kind of back and forth. We often talk about mental health, and then we talk about mental illness. So I like to start by saying, when you think of mental health, we know it's just as important as our physical health, and we all have it. If you have a brain, you have mental health. So it's something we want to support, we want to protect, we want to, manage it, whether you're having great days or sad days. That's our mental health. But when we think about mental illness, it's a bit different. We know not everyone will have a diagnosed mental illness. We know it's approximately 1 in 5. And this would include people diagnosed with schizophrenia, depression, bipolar, so much more serious, where it's an illness, where you have treatment. So sometimes people use them back and forth, but there is a bit of a difference. We know mental health, again, we all have it. We do incredible things to protect our own mental health, whereas mental illness is a much more disturbance in the way you're feeling, you're thinking, and perhaps acting. We've done some talking tonight about how we think about people who are unhoused, how we think about people who are struggling with addiction. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. We know there's a stigma. We know that we have thoughts about the people we might see on the street, the people who are struggling with addiction. We know it's changing. I go into schools and hear young people talk about what they think mental illness is about and addiction, and the language is changing. They have it. They have the language. They're talking about it. They're acknowledging their feelings. So we know the work that we're doing and the work of our partners is making a change. We just need more supports. People are asking for help. People are reaching out. We have incredible campaigns that have really pushed people to say, I need some support. So money is always something, funding, services, and we have great partnerships. So that's a great thing. I ask you, when you think about some of your own judgments, and we all have them because we're human beings. Every single one of us has a judgment about something. When we see maybe someone who is struggling, or when we think about, some of the people we've talked about tonight, I ask you to really think about your own judgment. And we all have our own story, so we have our own experiences that really create those judgments. And it's about being human. But I thought when I was invited to talk about compassion, I really think, reflecting on our own thoughts and our own feelings. And so when you maybe see somebody or you hear about someone, really think about what judgment maybe you are bringing and question it and reflect on it. And I think that's a big piece about being compassionate. Some of the language we use, and I've heard great language tonight, when we think about someone who is struggling, they're a person first. So whether they're unhoused or they're struggling with mental illness or addiction, we're always a person first. So we often say a person is struggling or a person needs support. So that's something else to think about. What kind of language do we use? We know there's a shift. Again, when I go into high schools and I ask the question, when you think about mental illness, what comes to your mind? I always suspect you're going to hear crazy, you're going to hear psycho, but it's not there. Again, the language has changed. So as we look at different generations, we know languages have changed throughout the time. But again, reflect on what kind of language are you using? When you talk about someone who is struggling, maybe it's someone you care about, think about that language, because it really impacts that stigma. So what do we do at the Canadian Mental Health Association? Well, we do a lot. Like I said, we started off small, we're quite large. We've really adapted to meeting people where they're at and being creative about what do we do with our funding and how do we support people in our community. So I've broken it down a little bit. So I'm going to talk about our direct client support. So we have programs that deal one-on-one around case management, addiction, therapy, and we also have a great program around peer support. So someone with lived experience is supporting someone else with lived experience, and that can be really powerful. We have incredible community partnerships. I see some of our partners here today. So whether we're doing outreach, whether we're going into encampments, going into community places like the library, trying to connect with people, letting them know what we're doing that a lot, and we're doing more of that. We have an incredible partnership with our police services, our Barrie Police and our OPP, where we do ride-alongs with an officer. So we have a mental health crisis worker with the officer. So addressing those calls, right? Adding that extra level of support, having that wraparound where people are really being connected with resources. And of course, we have a crisis line and crisis beds. So perhaps you don't need the hospital, perhaps you need some support. We have a program for that too. That's 24 hours, 7 days a week. We certainly have specialized programs. Maybe folks that are struggling with a serious mental illness that need a psychiatrist, medication support, a social worker, we have those programs as well. We have justice programs, and of course our crisis programs. And then a little bit more about what I do is I get to go out and I have these great talks with people. We provide education for community groups. We work with specialized athletic teams. We have a great partnership with the Barrie Colts, because we know kids that are playing high-level sports can really struggle. So we do specialized education, getting out and talking about how we can help. And then I like to just do a little bit about how you can help, because you might think, I can't help someone, I don't know anything. Well, what do you think the easiest thing, well, it's not easy, but what do you think one of the things that can be really effective if somebody comes to you and says, I need your help? It's listening. We don't have to have the answers. If you think about somebody who's a great listener in your life, are they trying to solve everything, or are they just giving you the space? So that's what I want to leave with you tonight, is reflect on how you listen. Are you able to let somebody talk? Are you let them, tell you things without your judgment? Are you letting someone have their space? Because that's really, at the end of the day, often what we want, is someone to be able to listen, right? Not solve everything, not try to fix it, but just be there for you. So again, when we think about compassion, I'm going to ask you again, are you a good listener? Is there some things that you can maybe work on? I have teenagers in my house, and I have a partner, and I sometimes think my dogs are the best listener. They don't talk, they don't have to tell me anything, but when they sit with me, I feel that support. So I just think sometimes they are the nicest people in my house. All right, so again, these slides are going to be available. We have a crisis line. We have incredible resources on our website. And again, I thank you for taking the time tonight to be here, because this is really powerful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of our basic principles is nothing about us without us. And so I want to invite Russell to come up and speak.
Thank you very much, everyone. What a lineup. I'm very, very, very honored to be here and speak on behalf of my community. My name is Russ, and I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I've had some practice over the years. I spoke at council. I spoke on CBC radio. I've also spoken in our local news. But I attend this church. This is my practice. This is what keeps me in good practice. I like to say God's practice. You see, I'm trying to represent my community from all sides and perspectives. Like it or not, we're all fighting in this fight together. And today feels like another mountaintop moment for me. A chance to shout out how valuable, precious life is. And to be mentally strong first. I've always advocated for mentally strong first. We would never leave a heart attack victim alone, and we'd never leave a child gasping for air alone. So why are we leaving people with mentally unstable conditions alone? The answer is most often fear. Fear of what we don't understand, fear of what we don't control, what we can't control, fear that makes us step back when we should step forward. But fear is not protection, fear is abandonment. And abandonment is deadly. I've lived here long enough to remember when the streets felt lighter, when the neighbors stopped to talk, when hope was easy to see, but I've also watched how pain has crept in. Urban explosions, slowly at first, and now all at once. One day, a chronic homeless man asked me to read his poem, and with his permission, I'd like to share that with you now. He said, "I'm not trying to get back, I'm trying to get better. I mask my suffering as it grows. I hide in the darkness so nobody knows. My mind is my prison, and I'll never be free. I do what I can just to cope, while all of you keep talking about hope." So those words hit me hard, because behind the garbage, the yelling, the drug use, there's a story like this one, a person trying to get better. And yet we treat our mental health crisis the same way the world sometimes mishandles refugee crises. We rush with resources without structure. We pour hope into broken pipelines. True recovery requires process and presence. In a refugee crisis, trained workers intake each person's needs one at a time. They bring order where there is chaos. That's habilitation, and that's what we need for the mind. Because those struggling with addiction, trauma, mental illness are in every sense refugees of the mind, displaced from stability, safety, and belonging, and living under siege from not armies, but for their own relentless inner wars. Fear tells us to stay away. Envy tells us they're not like us. Compassion says stay. Leave an Alzheimer's patient unattended, they may wander out into danger. Leave an addicted unattended, they may overdose in silence. Or leave a teenager with suicidal tendencies alone, and they may never see tomorrow. The standard must be the same. Never leave them unattended. Not the anxious, not the addicted, not the forgotten. When I hit my lowest point, I remember thinking, where do I start? And the answer was simple. You start anywhere, but you start. Because the only thing that kept me alive at that point was a small thread of love. That thread, this connection, is what saves people. So today my message is simple. Stop leaving people alone in their pain. Let's guide instead of shackle, heal instead of shame, and lift instead of judge. Hope isn't a passing thought. It's what gets us up in the morning. Faith steadies us when we're shaken, and compassion reminds us that every one of us has struggled too. Because when we see someone homeless, addicted, or high, we often see only chaos, the tense, the litter, the brokenness. But what we fail to see is that their conscious self is asleep. They're not fully present to the consequences of their actions. And I remember the words of Jesus, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do." They know not what they do. They're not willingly choosing despair. They're trapped within it. And our response must be not rejection, but mercy. So from my heart, I want to say, let's carry each other, not our silence. Let's replace neglect with care, despair with trust, and fear with love. Because in the end, it isn't just about aid, it's about dignity. It's about giving each person, every refugee of the mind, a chance to come home to themselves again. God bless you all. Thank you. I'm very proud to be part of this community.
I'm going to invite John Ruth to come forward and to speak on behalf of Barrie Cares.
Thank you, Father Larry. So, we've heard a lot from some great speakers today, and I just want to point out the most important word that I saw today, and that is hope. I want to introduce everybody to an organization called Barrie Cares. Barrie Cares was created last year by a group of concerned residents and business owners to try and find a solution for homelessness in our community. We started brainstorming. We set out to identify the organizations that have the knowledge and the ability to address the problem. As you've heard, homelessness is a complex issue with a range of contributing factors, including mental illness, substance use, poverty, housing supply, personal preference, or a combination. In our community, we have over 50 separate nonprofit or government organizations which try and deal with different aspects of the issue in Barrie. While funding comes from the City of Barrie, the county is the lead public sector organization tasked with addressing homelessness. Barrie Cares tries to engage the private sector to provide the link between the county and others. We're a facilitator, not a service operator. We form collaborations with key community partners, including the City of Barrie, the County of Simcoe, Canadian Mental Health Association, the RVH, Barrie Police Services, Georgian College, and others to create a coordinated plan. We meet almost weekly. Last year, Barrie Police Services conducted a community safety survey. The survey identified that 65% of people felt unsafe downtown during the day, and 94% felt unsafe downtown at night. The feelings cannot be ignored. But these feelings must be balanced with the needs of the homeless. In Barrie, last night, there were 136 people living in established shelters and more living in encampments. They are our neighbors and need help. Everyone needs a roof over their head, food in their stomach, and a place to store their belongings. Barrie's current shelters were originally established in old buildings next to residential and commercial neighborhoods with services spread throughout the city. We believe that the permanent solution is to create a full-service campus of care which provides purpose-built housing that can be used for shelter from time to time and other purposes if we get to the point when shelter is no longer needed. Together with that, there will be access to all required wraparound services. The idea is to put it in one campus. We are working with our partners to create this coordinated solution. In the meantime, we're focused on temporary solutions. In the past year, we've worked to help our community partners secure Heart Hub funding and help the county expedite the opening of modular shelter units. Due to efforts over the past year, the county will have added 160 new beds for homeless through units and hotel vouchers. The city has directed staff to prioritize the permit process to allow all units to be operational by this winter. It is quite an achievement that everyone needs to know about. Homelessness is not a political issue. It's a humanitarian issue. Barrie Cares exists because we believe we have a solution, and we look to work with our community to help achieve that solution. Now I'm going to introduce you to my friend Paul Larch, who's the director of Barrie Cares, and he's the brains behind the slideshow you're about to see.
Good evening. It's great to see so many familiar faces here. My name is Paul Larch. I am a retired business person that lives in actually Springwater, but have had businesses throughout this entire area. And I'm here to talk to you more about Barrie Cares. And I'm just going to follow up on a few things that John just talked about. I won't spend too much time on these slides, other than to tell you that you've already heard this today. The issue of homelessness, and this is one of the reasons why I got involved last year, was that it really has been an issue for years, but has really accelerated over just the last few years, particularly from pre-COVID to currently today, the rise in homelessness. And I think that I'm not surprising anybody when I say any of that information. Barrie Cares, as John mentioned, is a group of community-minded people. A lot of us are business people or run businesses, so we've taken a business approach to some of this, and we're hoping that that's going to create and expedite results that can help everyone here. One of the slides that we like to show when we're talking to service clubs is that it's very expensive if you end up at our VH for a night versus being even in a jail or a federal corrections center. Really, the best way for us to do this is to work together as a community so that we can bring people together with the dignity that we want to do. We use all of the data that we pull from the County of Simcoe. There's a QR code up there, but they have real-time data on homelessness, and you can actually see it updated almost every day. Barrie Cares' mission is really, our vision is to have a future where homelessness is a solvable problem, but we have to do it, and we have to do it together. Our values are compassion, dignity, collaboration, knowledge, inclusivity, and advocacy. We talked a little bit about who the partners are. You can see them up there. I'm not going to read all the names, but what we did is we brought all the stakeholders together about a year ago, and that includes the county, the city, Canadian Mental Health Association, RVH, Barrie Police, Chamber of Commerce, and we did some brainstorming. We looked at best practices to say what communities are getting good success at tackling some of these problems. And bringing these people together, we call ourselves the grease between the wheel for all of these different groups, because they all have great intentions, but they are silos to a certain extent. And by bringing them all together, we were able to put a strategic plan together. And that is what culminates to what John talked about, and that is the campus of care. We want to build a campus of care. Now, this is going to take some time. We can't do it in a very short period of time, but we can do it in 2 phases, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to start with what we call a temporary campus of care. And we already have the location. We're using the paramedic building that's on Tiffin Street that some of you may be familiar with. And in there, we want to put a kitchen and dining facility. We want to make sure that there's urgent care that's available, that there's showers and laundry facilities, that there's a warming center, and there's food security services. Also, concurrently with that, the County of Simcoe will be putting in 40 modular shelter beds right next door. So if anyone who drives by on Tiffin Street, you may have seen that building. And what we're doing right now is we're raising $250,000. We've already talked to some service clubs, and we have some Barrie Cares people here, but I think we're already over $50,000 or $60,000 raised. But we're still going to need a lot of help. And that will allow us to build our temporary campus of care and actually get it up and running this winter, so we can actually really make a difference, particularly when the cold weather comes around. But ultimately, we want to build a bigger campus of care. And this bigger campus of care will likely be 25 to 30,000 square feet. We don't know where it's going to be yet. We have been in negotiations with the city of Barrie for a while, and we're looking at different land. But this will provide a lot more opportunity. It'll be a triage center so that when people are facing homelessness, we can make sure that they're going to get the right type of care that they're going to get. So this will be a short-term place. It will have 50 beds, but again, it'll have shower, laundry, food services, storage. It's going to have direct coordination with the County of Simcoe, CMHA, and RVH. And it'll have health and wellness clinic, medical, dental, and pharmacy. It'll also have addiction and mental health and housing programs. And it'll be pet friendly as well. We've heard that come up a few times. These are things that are really important, and it will have good transportation in and out to make sure that people can get to where they have to go. And again, you can download this list and see it after, but this is what the solution ultimately will be able to take us to that next level. So our time frame is this year is the temporary campus of care. And then again, with our partners and stakeholders, we'll start working, and this will require some fundraising from the community, but for the permanent campus of care. But that likely will take 2 or 3 years before we can get it going. I know I want to stay within my 15 minutes here, but the expected outcomes here is that 100% of people that are facing homelessness will at least have a place to go now. That'll give them dignity, it'll give them response that they're looking for, and it'll give the people at least that will be able to point them in the right direction for where they want to go. But really it's going to reduce the burden on our ERs, our first responders, and our social services. And also what we want to do is create awareness and increase public support by making people have the type of empathy that we've heard about tonight. Keenan's talk was great earlier on to really look at it from a homeless point of view, and it's tragic, and we can make a difference. So our ask tonight is we are going to be raising funds, and there will be some ways for you to contribute if you want. You're going to hear about it very shortly. We're putting out a major media release in the next couple of weeks, so you'll find out more about what we're up to. But we also want to advocate what we're all doing here tonight. We're advocating and talking about all the different perspectives about what this problem is all about. But really what we're here to do is we're collaborating. We're bringing everybody together. We're not the service provider. We're not going to run these things. There's great organizations that can do that. But we're the ones who are going to push to make sure that these things happen. And with that, I thank you.
And we also have another organization here that is Habitat for Humanity. So we're going to invite Rob Sequoia to come forward and speak.
Thank you, Father Larry. Thank you to the impressive group that preceded me. Amazing. I always learn something new every single one of these that I attend. And I want to thank everybody who took time out of their day to come and hear that we as a community are trying to solve a very complex problem. I'm going to ask you to participate in something with a show of hands. How many of you in here has heard of Habitat for Humanity? Amazing, amazing. And I'll ask you to put up your hands if you know what Habitat for Humanity does. Oh, that's actually way better than most places I go to. We do a really bad job of promoting or sharing with the community what we do. They've always had this philosophy of don't waste money on PR and marketing. Just let's build homes. So a lot of times we build homes and we have a waiting list. No waiting list. And we'd be in shock going, why do not people want to get into home ownership without down payment, without interest-bearing mortgages? Barriers removed into it, and we'd sit back and go, we have 3 homes. We don't have anybody who we can bet with. That's because they prioritized
build it, they will come. We're the first case that didn't exist. So I go around now and do these little tours of speaking about what we do. And the first thing I like to tell everybody is what we don't do. We don't give away free homes. That's the myth number one with Habitat, is that we give away free homes. We don't do that. I wish. We don't do rentals. There's a reason behind it, because as the organization was founded, they believed in home ownership as an avenue to build strength with the family, financially and generationally, through other avenues of home ownership. But we only do disaster relief. Actually, when I joined Habitat, that's what I thought that we did. So, what we do is provide affordable home ownership for lower income families. We are the builder, we are the mortgage holder. What we provide in our program is zero down payment, mortgage, interest-free mortgage for our families, maxed at 25% of their net income. I know we talk about gross, we do net. Why is that important for us? Because we do workshops with our families so that they can learn about financial wellness, because eventually they're going to grow out of our program. We have a strategically built way of building our homes so that you actually do grow out of it. Our program and our mortgage model gives us the right of first refusal when they want to move on, which they usually do, because our units aren't very big. After 7 years is the data that shows that they move on to traditional home ownership. Because they give us right of first refusal at what we mortgage them at, gives us the opportunity to buy those homes back relatively inexpensive. We go in there, bring them to new status of another family. What does that do for us? It gives us the opportunity to fight affordable housing in perpetuity. Now, I realize standing here, following everybody else's stories, I seem like a sore thumb, because I'm a mortgage lender and a builder. But what I'm here to share is that there is a housing continuum, and in that housing continuum, we have to facilitate that there is no walls at any point of them. Because as soon as you create that stoppage, it backs up everything. So, if you can see this slide, well, I have one up here, where we are, we're at the end of that continuum, right before market home ownership. But if we have a backlog here, rental housing stays, all of a sudden the supply is not there, which means that rental rates go up, subsidized housing has no avenue to go anywhere, bogs down transitional housing, which in turn leaves the shelters full. And then we lead to that problem of being housed. Our goal is to eliminate that wall and have all of the social housing, rental, market rental be able to go into our program of home ownership, opening the doors to supply, opening the doors to a continuum that actually flows, and with the word hope, would allow for this problem of the unhoused to hopefully disappear. When I say that, I say it with hope because last year, across Canada, we built 575 homes, which meant we cleared out 575 spaces along that continuum. People ask us, well, what kind of families get into a Habitat home? Like I said, subsidized rental or market rental that just can't have the down payment. There's a barrier with the bank. We don't look at credit like a bank would. We try to remove every barrier so that we can allow those families to have home ownership. Again, clearing the pathway for that. But if you look around, it's all of us. Every single one of us in here is a candidate for a Habitat house. And it actually, it's the only pathway I believe that if we don't clear that and have some creative movement along the housing continuum, the problems will just get worse and worse and worse. So, I know I feel like I'm the sore thumb again, but I'm going to tell you,
you need a thumb to make the hand lift up everything. So that's where I come from. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sortham. Thank you. So now is an opportunity to ask questions of the presenters today, to make statements and to ask questions. So I will bring the microphone to you and you can ask a question. If you put up your hand, I can recognize you. But if someone else is speaking and you put your hand up, you can't hear it anymore. So don't do that.
Barrie Cares. What differentiates you from the Busby Center and the Gilbert Center?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Barrie Cares is a group of people that are volunteering. We're just community people, and we're bringing all of these different groups together. We're bringing them together so that we can all sit together at a table and brainstorm using best practices what's going to help work this problem together. So we're not an organization, and these are great organizations, but we're not that type of organization. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
All right.
You're going to have to stand up.
Thank you, Father Larry. My name is Brian O'Grady, and I was really encouraged by all the speakers I heard this evening, and I felt that all speakers are obviously looking towards the same kind of goals that Father Larry has set out with his ministry of homelessness, which is fantastic. I think we should give Father Larry a round of applause for his efforts. I'm not going to be judgmental because everybody here has been very positive, but I'm going to stir the pot a little bit. The thing is that here we have a number of speakers who spoke on homelessness, about putting their efforts in towards solving this problem. All speakers, I felt, were heartfelt, and the only thing that I'm wondering about is where are the representatives from this city, this town, this region? Where is the representative of the NPP? Where are the representatives of NP? Where is the representative from the city? This is an important topic here. We even had the chief of police here talk about being compassionate. I heard him mention it at least 2 times, maybe even more. And that's what we all need to have. And it's very disappointing to see representatives in our public forum not even being here tonight. And hopefully the message may get across to them that, you know what, it's time to take a position on this, because you know what, these people, these homeless people are human beings like all of us. And when it all comes said and done, the final answer will be looked upon, and be looked upon very, very well. Thank you, Father.
You just want me to get my steps in, eh? Just alternating back and forth, right?
I'm relatively new to Barrie. I moved here in 2021, middle of COVID. So this is a story from Hamilton of something that worked, and my question is anybody pursuing this in Barrie? 4 men's shelters got together, tried to do a housing first model. They all put a worker in. The end of 5 years, 120 people were housed, 82% continued to be housed, and 1 of the 4 shelters closed. That seems like success. I'm not hearing about that. So my question is, anybody pursuing housing first in Barrie?
So Housing First actually is a Canadian federal government policy that was enacted or declared a number of years ago, more than 15 years ago. I was on a funding committee for Peel Region at that time when Housing First was first talked about.
It's a great question, and I guess the short answer is right now every sort of potential form of housing or housing model is being explored, and I did touch on in Simcoe County something that we were able to stand up very quickly with our dedicated service providers were those rapid rehousing projects, so those modulars. We are looking at any opportunity to find existing structures or structures that we can build very quickly. We have a modular construction project, our first one that we're experimenting with in Collingwood right now. So that is taking an existing building, so we demolish that building, and we're able to add a 30-unit construction modular that from the time of demolish to the time of move-in is going to be about 9 months. Massive, like such a quick pace for a new construction project. So depending on the outcome of that, those are the sort of projects that we're looking to stand up quickly. We're looking at Rose Street. We have 220 unit affordable housing build going up. That's going to take a couple of years to get off the ground. So we know that the need is now, and we are trying to make up for years and years of lack of investment in affordable housing options. So temporarily, we have bought these modular facilities, not the modular construction separately, and we've had some pretty great outcomes already. So the youth one, I think we've housed, I'm probably going to misspeak here, 27 individuals, so 27 youth we have permanently housed in a year? In a year. The seniors program in Collingwood, we've permanently housed 13 of the 18 people who have been in that program since earlier this year. So having the ability to have on-site 24/7 supports with the intentional housing outcomes or the assertive housing pieces tied into those supports, we're seeing some great successes. So I think our ability to scale those up, we have a 40-unit modular coming, we have 2 additional modulars over on Blake Street now. Great thing about modulars, you can move them around. But the modular construction, in addition to our new housing and homelessness strategy, which is going before council, so probably within the next couple of weeks that'll come out. But again, we're looking to add over 1,000 housing units, that's over a 10-year period. But to supplement that, if we could stand up these modular facilities or modular construction, those are essentially everything is on the table right now. We continue to engage community partners and our 16 municipalities in the 2 cities of Barrie earlier.
I'll just also say that we had a letter writing campaign in April here at St. Mary's, and over 3,000 letters were written to MPPs in Barrie, to the Reeve or whatever it is for the County of Simcoe, Basil Clark, and to the Premier, to the Minister of Health, and to the Minister of Housing. So about 600 or 700 to each of those people. That was the answer. Absolute silence.
Thank you. Today I read an article with a case history in it about a house in West Toronto called Unhoused. It's just finished its first year. It not only supported and continues to support up to 50 who were homeless people, but what is unique about it is that all the help that these people need are in situ. They're right there. And if any of you get the chance to read it, it compares the cost of this model and the amount of money it's saving with not only the hospitals, but the incredible number of homeless people with issues that go into emergency departments. I wonder, number one, I have 2 quick questions. Number one, if that has been made known. Number 2, these wonderful places like Barrie Care, whether they have followed other similar situations or plan to, and also has there been comparison with other European successful models?
Who wants to grab that answer?
It's great comments, and actually I see Mayor Dunford from Amelia behind us here, and we were actually speaking about this earlier today. So Dr. Andrew Rosario of Toronto Community Health Network, they stood up the Dunn House, and it is getting a lot of attention for all the right reasons. We know for a fact that supportive housing is beyond needed right now, and we've actually had some conversations with Andrew himself, and trying to find, how can we get health at the table here in Simcoe County, here in the city of Barrie. We know the supports come from Ontario Health, and unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of success historically in years, even just having ministries talk to one another. And I can't start pointing fingers here publicly, but when there's red tape within existing ministries or across ministries themselves, it poses challenges, because that's the majority of your funding is coming from both provincial and federal envelopes. So we continue to advocate that as an excellent model. Results speak for themselves, and I think that is something that would be extremely successful and welcomed here in Simcoe County. We're going to continue to push for something like that.
Yeah, just keep going back and forth, Just one side to the other side.
Thank you, Father. Full disclosure, my name is Marshall Green. I worked for 8 years for the County of Simcoe. I know that more affordable housing is in the works, both in the city of Barrie and at the county. I know about the city of Barrie, but right now it's in a lot of problem because the economic situation now is so bad. A lot of the housing that would have had an affordable component is not being built right now. But I know that the county is helping. I'm personally involved with CARP, the Canadian Association of Retired Persons, and doing a pilot project for seniors, which is being very dramatically helped by one of Paul Larch's developer friends, who's helping us both with the land and with pushing the project forward. What I'm afraid of, though, is that there's one key issue that I think is being overlooked and is only touched on here. Is Sarah Peddle in the audience anywhere? Hi, Sarah. I was very moved by a speech that Sarah gave at my Rotary Club, and that touched on the 18 months during the end of COVID when the County of Simcoe took over 2 hotels and took all the homeless and put them in these hotels. So for 18 months, there were no homeless on the streets of Barrie. However, at the end of that, when they started doing the statistics, there were 4 cases of COVID over that 18 months. There were 178 suicides and overdoses. So there were no homeless problem at that time, but it's a mental health and addiction problem. And I'm very interested in knowing what Barrie Cares, Paul, that you talk about having treatment programs or treatment available for some of these problems. What I think is really needed, though, and what I understand is not available from the province or the federal government now, is follow-up for these. These people can't just be given a program and then left. There has to be follow-up.
You want to tackle that? And what agencies are you involving in that? Like that's, if I didn't get clean, if I'm a drug addict and I want to get clean, what do I do now? Now maybe you're not the one to answer that. Maybe someone else will. You're not.
Well, they're already
where do I go? And is there room? Is there places here?
Okay, well, that's a lot of questions.
Go ahead.
I'm going to first answer your question. As I mentioned before, Barrie Cares, we are not service providers ourselves. We are just a bunch of community-minded business people that are trying to just volunteer our time to bring all of these people together to come up with the solutions. Now, that being said, we do have the Canadian Mental Health Association that is working with us, and you heard from Liz earlier. We have RVH, who are part of our group as well, and of course the County of Simcoe. The County of Simcoe, and I'm not sure how many are familiar with the HEART program. It just recently launched, but this came together, and Barrie Cares was involved in bringing RVH, Canadian Mental Health Association, different groups together to get the funding for that from the province. But I do know, and this is just through the fact that I'm on the Barrie Cares group, and we hear reports, is that in the last few weeks, and again, these numbers might be wrong, but they are bringing in 10 people that are that need the most help, and they are giving them the help that they need. And they've done this now for, I think, about a month or so. And I think 4 weeks now. I don't have all the numbers, but I do know that it's very, very encouraging. I think there's like 30 or 35 people that have gone through this and are getting the help that they need and are coming out of this, continuing to get that help and support. So we hear you. It is part of the plan to make sure that we can help those people. Those are the people that they just can't help themselves right now. We have to help them, and we're going to help them.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nasser George Mayer. So I have 2 questions. On October the 2nd, there was a meeting between Dan Carter, the Mayor of Oshawa, and also Mayor Alex, because he said he has a solution to homelessness. I don't know if you know that, because I personally know Dan Carter. He was actually homeless before. He was actually addicted to many substances. We don't want to judge anyone. He said he has some kind of solution for the homelessness crisis here in Barrie. My question to Barrie carers is, I think you do a fantastic job. Give me my hands for that, please. Because at 113 Tiffin Street, in the past probably 6 or 7 months, when a harsh winter wasn't there, me and my kids used to drop off a lot of food in there, but the problem was because they had only about 10, 15 beds in there, the rest of the food was just basically was returned to us. So I hope you're going to do something about it, that you're going to build more beds in there so we can be able to drop more food. Because I was homeless before in my life. I was homeless on the street with my kids for 2 months. I was in Kitchener, and I remember the Habitat, thank you very much for the Habitat of the homes. He tried to help me out with the homes, but I could not help out, because what happens with a Habitat, you have to build your own stuff in order to do it. But the problem is, because my dad died, we had to move on. But I think we encourage everybody to get into this homeless situation, and everybody's homeless is a dignity. Everybody should have a roof over their head and food on the table. Thank you so much.
Full disclosure, I'm part of Barrie Cares as well. One of the things that happens is in the community there's a lot of different types of unhoused individuals or help or support needs. There is no one answer, one solution. So the idea is to build out the right kind of solutions in the right time frame for the community needs at a given moment in time. When you do that, you'll create the right inflows to support the most immediate needs, and then you'll create the right outflows, which will then go through the continuum of care. So you'll have all sorts of different housings, whether it's shelters, transitional support, and otherwise. Paul talked about the recent thing about the cohorts program in there, and one of the things that's unique about that is not everyone's ready to deal with their mental health or addictions. Not everyone's ready to deal with those things. So the ones that are willing to take those necessary steps, we're going to bring them in. That's what Barrie Cares is going to do with our strategic partners. We're going to bring them in. They're going to follow their path in whatever way that they can, and however comfortable they feel. Some of them are going to fall off somewhere down that line. We're going to recapture them, place them in the kind of support that they need to be in, and so that hopefully we can get them back around. Those that succeed will move from one type of housing, from shelter to transformal to home, hopefully permanent houses. And that's how you deal with it, one step at a time, addressing all the different needs within our community and addressing the most urgent one needs first.
All right, just a quick question here. So obviously there's been a lot of positivity that stand up, and that's good. I love positivity, but you know, if you come to a meeting like this, you hear a lot of very obvious things. But people outside of this meeting are making decisions that are the opposite of what we think are obvious. So an example would be pets in shelters, couples in shelters, safe consumption sites. Can somebody from one of the agencies, anybody who's informed on this, sort of give a little bit of the other side? Why is it so difficult to make supports that are appealing to people, that are appealing to governments that would fund them? Why have we had difficulty doing that historically?
I don't want to see a hand of an agency.
I think it's a couple things. I think lack of political will is the biggest. And I think it serves some politicians to not support certain people and to have a group of people that you can keep, like I said in my speech, that you can keep punching down on, rather than looking at the people in positions of power who have the responsibility to actually solve these issues. So I think as citizens, we have a lot of power to influence the people who we've elected, and if they aren't doing the work that we need them to do, then we have the power to change that. So we can change that.
This is Deepak from Simcoe Community Media. So my question is for Police Chief and for Keenan. And I'm going to put Chief on the spot. He said Barrie is one of the safest city in Canada. But recently, police has demanded more increase in the budget. And there has been demand from the community. We have been talking to a lot of people that there is a need for support for other organizations like Gilbert Centers or Busby. So what do you say about asking for more money that will go into policing? And I would like to like Keenan to address that as well.
That's a fair question. We're very expensive. We are very, very expensive. So, you packed Seattle, the Chad Zone, 2020, complete defunding of the police. We don't need them anymore. And I won't fearmonger, because I think the important thing here is this. I recognize that we are an expensive part of society, but I would argue we're a necessary part. I didn't say that everything we do is crime related. We're a relatively safe city in a very safe province in a safe country. That doesn't agree with how a lot of people feel. I think some of us know that it is a safe city, but it's just not about enforcing the law. So who do you call when someone goes missing? You know, we're missing children, missing elderly people called we get a year, intimate partner violence, skyrocketing numbers. The uncomfortable reality of the social contract is that there is I would like to believe that we understand that we should all live peacefully beside each other, and I think that would be a great thing. But too many people have either read Leviathan or believe in the Hobbesian reality that if there is not an entity that is there to stop one another from harming others or from preying upon others in a predatory manner, that would continue unfettered. I am not trying to be a fearmonger. The reality is this. What we do for society is we represent the law. We are not the law. Now, would we like to go out of business? Absolutely. Will we ever? No. Because we live in the real world. And I can appreciate, and I think a comment was in the back there somewhere, and in a lot of positive. And folks, if I could, and I asked the gentleman during the break, give me a number of homeless people in Barrie. What's the number?
632.
560?
632.
632. 1,000 homes are just built outside this door. Do we still have a homeless problem?
Yes. No, we
Why? No. There's 1,000 homes rent-free outside there. Why do we still have a homeless problem? There's a complex reality that we're facing here. And I just don't want to get stuck in the echo chamber that we're, and I'm not defending anyone, but I've yet to actually meet any level of political body, be it county, municipal, provincial, federal. Look, folks, they may not be doing it the right way from your perspective, but I'm going to suggest they might be trying their best, and they might be really doing a bad job at it. That's not my place. The reality is that people are... Were they invited? Were they invited?
They weren't invited.
They weren't. Come on, folks, I just asked this, and I don't mind taking the hits. I don't mind it. This is my role.
Well, there's other people who have asked for also.
I would say if we look at individuals and we hope for good intent and we project that. I don't know why they're not here. Perhaps they should be, but my ask is this. We're a necessary part of any society. I would like to see them here, and sure, they should answer.
The mayor knew about it, and he's got a representative here who hasn't identified themselves.
Thank you, Chief Response. I mean, I think there's good intent and then there's impact, right? And I think we need to think about what public safety really means, right? Like, where does public safety come from? And I think when everyone has the necessities of life taken care of, when everyone has a home, food on the table, a sense of meaning and connection and community, that's what creates safety in our communities. Like, if we actually look at the evidence of where crime comes from, it's from desperation, it's from untreated mental health issues. So we need to actually look at the root of these problems instead of just treating the symptoms all the time, right? And budgets are moral documents, right? It's how we decide as a community what's important to us and how we want to care for people in our community. And we spend 26% of our entire city budget on the Barrie Police, and we are one of the safest cities in the entire world. So that means something, right? But maybe we need to look at how we reinvest in those other priorities to create a true sense of safety, right? Housing, healthcare, care for people, not just enforcement.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I live down at the waterfront, and I've been there for 28 years. I walk along the waterfront every day. I speak to those people that are known as...
who are unhoused.
I don't know what they call themselves, but all those people, I don't speak to all of them, but to those that I can speak to, I talk to them. A lot of them can't talk. They're on drugs. They're drunk. Or they see an old man like me, and they say, what do I want to say to you, right? So, we have a big problem in our country. And our national government has said, we have a housing problem. We know how to build houses. Our Prime Minister is telling us that. And we're going to spend the money on that, apparently. But accompanying that is a problem that has to be dealt with people at the very grassroots of our country. The people that I talk to, that I see this year, they're not in Barrie next year. It's like shifting sands of people. And this is a kind of creeping a disaster in our nation that is even more serious, I think, than housing. Yes, you could put them in a house. But I'm not sure if we had enough houses to go around. I think I said enough.
What we recognize is that housing first was, as a policy, the federal government policy, says that the way you put supports around a person is first give them a house so that the supports can go around them. The addiction, mental health, all those issues, you know. So I have one final thing, but I'm going to let Sarah speak for a moment.
I just have a couple of quick things. A couple of other housing projects in our community that are working really well are Lucy's Place. It's a partnership with Busby Centre and Redwood Park Communities. 24 units, supported transitional units in our community that are supporting people that are experiencing chronic homelessness, transition. So that's one project, and then our other project is Paula's Place. For those of you who remember Paula Queen, it was named after Paula from Elizabeth Fry. And it's a partnership with Elizabeth Fry and Busby Centre, and it's 14 accessible units, and that's permanent housing. So that's 24/7 staff at both of those projects, hugely supported by the county. I just want to express as well the immense support that we get from the county as service providers. They don't get enough credit sometimes, and they're only dealing with what they get dealt with, right? So there's different levels of government that also need to support this region as the service manager. So if we can give a round of applause for the county as well. And just a quick thing. So I've been with the center 17 years, a long time. I've been on a lot of collaborating tables, as part of Barrie Pathways, as part of a lot of different things. Still at lots of different collaborating tables. So I really do hope that as we all talk about collaboration, because we all do it, that we really start collaborating. That we really start having those conversations with everybody, not just with some. Those conversations need to include everybody at the table. So I really hope that does start to happen. And one last thing, I'd like to see a show of hands of who knew that there was 3 people in our community that died last week. That's a sobering thought right there. 3 people lost their lives on our streets.
Cooperation, coordination, collaboration. Take each one of them is further along the spectrum, if you will, of working together. So I think that it's easier to cooperate, harder to coordinate, and most difficult to collaborate. But that's where we need to keep moving towards, to be people of compassion. This past week I was on business in Winnipeg. It was warmer in Winnipeg than it was here. Don't be calling it Winterpeg, okay? And I got a chance to visit the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. And the second last level, up at the height, is there are these cards that say, I imagine, or I believe, and reconciliation is, love is, my hope is, all different kinds of open-ended kind of beginning lines. And so we have for you, as you leave tonight, either I imagine or I believe. Because I got to that point, and I hadn't even been thinking about this night, but somehow it was there in my heart. And I wrote, I believe that one day we will realize that adequate housing is a basic human right. We're at our 9:15 time. So I invite you to pick up one or the other, not both of them, there's not enough for both, but one each of I imagine or I believe. You can take that, finish the thought, and bring it to your church or your synagogue or your mosque on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. You can keep it on your fridge, or you can put it at your dining room table or your kitchen table. Drop it off at your MPP's office or the City Hall. And in that way, we will continue the journey, continue the conversation, to be a people of compassion and hope. Thank you all for your presence here, and thank you to all of us.